Well, we have two, I would say, honorable and senior person here. One is Amnon, and the other one is Mamphela. So these are the grandparents level. I believe, ZAKRI, you are also parents, grandparents. But these are the two seniors. I will give them as the superiority in the certain way. Although, according to the guidance, I have to follow the first sequence of all the speakers in the. But yes, actually, all this happens. Well, this initiative is coming from my side, and I was very much engaged in the last 1.5 years after our first meeting in Dubrovnik regarding East and West and how that will meet each other, and especially when we were talking about a new emerging civilization. Well, during that time, actually, I do come up with something and talking about collectivism and also individualism. And happily in 2020, when the COVID-19 starts, so I'm ready actually to talk about that, but somehow it has automatically come out. And China became the first one to be, I won't say accused, and somehow doing something with collectivism and very effectively. At that time was a little bit strange happened. So all the countries outside China became actually somehow against that kind of movement. It's very interesting. And that's a reason why I'm trying to put this as a topic and try to sort it out, whether the collectivism or individualism, or we put this here as freedom and authority, are they separated or are they combined? Well, this is the reason why we invite you as the panelists to talk about this, and with your own different area or different region in different opinions. Very interesting here. We have all the participants coming out from, I won't say non-European and non-American, but it is true. You look at the surroundings, although Gary, you are somehow also in India. So basically it's an outside USA and outside European. I'm very happy with that. That was what the one also I tried in the Club of Rome and say that something must happen outside Europe and United States, and that's us. I'm happy that we can start today's topic, and I hand it over to Amnon with your superiority and with your age and with your understanding, also long years with UNESCO, and also the declaration, your participation in the declaration of bioethics and human rights. So please go ahead.
Thank you very much. It's a real honor to be here with all of you. The corona plague increased the discussion about the so-called collision between the rights and the interest of the individual vis-a-vis those of the society. In my short presentation, I'm not going to talk about the contents of the ethical principles. I wish to talk about the rule, about the instruments, about that should enable the use of these principles, and mainly about the status or the part of ethical education. And the most critical mission, I think, is the delivery of the use of ethical principles from the abstract from the academic residence to the, I would say, the ground of reality. I'm going to, excuse me. I'm going to talk about 4 agents, I call them agents, that are expected to deliver the message of ethics to the whole society. And I mean, first of all, the legislature, the judiciary, the judge, the doctor, and the teacher. And there will be no chance for realizing the delivery of these ethical principles unless these 4 agents would be ready and able to learn the ethical principles, to study them, to be ready to adopt them, to be ready to use them. If I refer to the legislature, the ordinary legislature, of course, is driven by political considerations. But still, he has to be aware of the existence, of the meaning, of the weight of the ethical principles and of his duty to follow them. Coming on to the judge, the main function of a judge is to follow the law. But fortunately, judges do have another tool that they may and should use in special circumstances and with a specific case. And this is the interpretation instrument. Going on to the doctor. The ordinary doctor, of course, deals with his individual patient, but he should not disregard his duty in special cases to take into account that outside the hospital, outside the clinic, there are other patients who may have conflicting issues, conflicting rights and interests that maybe have some relevance to what he is doing with his individual patient. And finally, the teacher, this agent is expected to deliver to his students the ethical principles, but not only to tell them about it, but to train them to use them in ordinary circumstances as well as in emergency situation. Now, coming now to UNESCO. UNESCO undertook a very important mission, which is to prepare the tools that will enable the delivery of the ethical principles to their communities. If we refer to the legislature, the UNESCO has issued many legal documents, and maybe the classical one is the Universal Declaration of Bioethics and Human Rights, 2005. If we talk about the judges, UNESCO was the only body, international body, that produced, together with the International Organization of Judges, a book of bioethics for judges, more than 30 chapters, very important one. And UNESCO for the doctors produced more than 30 books until now and distributed them about bioethics all over the world. Now, about the teacher, this is, for me as an educator, this is the most important matter. And here UNESCO succeeded to produce two different projects. The first project was about to tell what should the teacher teach. And this is the international curriculum for bioethics education. And maybe the most important contribution of UNESCO was the second project, which was the establishment of a very modern methodology how to teach, not what to teach, but how to teach. And because of short of time, maybe I will refer only to 2 or 3 components of this very important product. First of all, it was some kind of cancellation of speeches and preaches about abstract thoughts of philosophy, concepts, and so on. And on the other hand, a very active involvement of the students during the whole session or the whole lesson and so on. The whole system is based on cases, medical cases including ethical dilemmas. So it is structured like this, that all these lessons, and this is now not all over the world, but in many, many countries, we have, UNESCO has built more than 240 centers in 5 continents, in 240 universities. So it starts maybe in a short review or report about a medical case which is relevant to this or that lesson, report about the medical case, the relevant medical case. And afterwards, there is some kind of question. For instance, what should the doctor do in such circumstances? And this is followed by 2, 4, or 6 answers, responses, suggestions. All of them are ethical, but they are conflicting. And the main part of the session and the main part of the class, of the classroom there is that the students are divided into small groups and they are starting to discuss it, and they have to discuss it and to reach a decision, maybe by compromise and so on. So UNESCO has produced also many other tools. I was personally, appointed by UNESCO 20 years ago. I was authorized to advance the teaching, the education of ethics in medical schools worldwide. And so if afterwards there will be more time, I can tell you about other examples as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for this starting point. And ethics is really an issue that we will continue discussing. Let me put it to Mamphela. It's my president of Club of Rome. Welcome. And then also a grandmother or great-grandmother, right? So please, it's yours.
Thank you so much, Yi-Heng, and thanks to all of you for being part of this panel. I just find the idea of juxtaposing individual freedom with social authority very puzzling, because it raises a fundamental question about how we define freedom itself. How do we define freedom? Is it freedom from something or freedom to do something? How does individual freedom sit in the context of a species that is essentially and fundamentally relational? So that's the first issue. I don't deny or negate the question of individual freedom and its importance, but I question why is it seemingly being juxtaposed, like it's in tension or in conflict with social authority. So that's my first point. My second point is to be human is to be relational. And in my culture in Africa, and this is our common ancestral culture, the whole humanity takes its original culture from this continent. And here we have been brought up to believe that once humanity is co-substantial to that of the humanity of others, that one cannot be a person outside of the affirmation, the interconnectedness, and the interdependence to others. That is what Ubuntu is about. It is about that inextricable link between one's being with the being of other humans, which immediately brings in the matter of the collective is an inherent part of who we are, and some form of social authority is necessary for us to be able to live together. So individual freedom, seen as freedom to be whom one would like to become, and to act in a way that contributes most to the well-being of others in this web of life, is, in my formulation and in the ethos that I was brought up with, the best life insurance for individuals and for the ecosystem as a whole. So individual freedom cannot be seen, as was put in the introductory paragraph, a messy disorder. In individual freedom in a culture infused by Ubuntu cannot be a messy disorder. It is an enabler of every one of us being the best we can be and contributing the best we can to the collective well-being and the sustaining of our ecosystem. The fourth point is about the issue of social harmony that was also raised as perhaps a problem in a society which would like to affirm human rights and that cultural diversity somehow might become or stand in the way of social harmony or individual rights. In my understanding, and from where I'm sitting in this, what Carlos, my friend, calls most of the world, social harmony is defined as an ecosystem in which interconnectedness and interdependence are a lived relational reality. And that it can be in conflict with individual rights. And it can't undermine the celebration of cultural diversity. In contrast, diversity is celebrated because it strengthens the whole. So individual rights that are framed as being in conflict with social harmony can only be those individual rights that are driven by the right to exploit, the right to dominate at the expense of others. And so I come to the conclusion that to be that humanity that emerges from this planetary moment of multiple crises, we have to be open to shift in mindsets. Those are my points.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's wonderful continuity or continuing the from the ethics to the human rights, and also the individual needs. When I try to put the East and West together, I am somehow opt to the Chinese way of defining using the 5 elements. If we look at the values which are common today, freedom, it's just the water in the 5 elements. Equality is the wood. Democracy, the fire. Legality, earth. And belief, metal. So they are interconnected somehow with the benefiting as one way, that's water, wood, fire, earth, and metal. And controlling the other way around is water, fire, metal, wood, earth also. If the dynamic balance, what we need is actually, we are trying to achieve all the time, regionally or locally. So with that, also connected with what Ubuntu was trying to explain or showing us in Africa, simply shows that I'm because you are. So it is a harmony somehow generated through these 5 elements going around. Okay, with that, I would like to hand it over to Jinfeng, our friend in China. Jinfeng?
I would like to share 5 points about this topic. First, people in China and as well as in some Eastern Asia countries accept collectivism more likely, since they experience very long time of agricultural civilization. Field cultivation need collectivism. This is the natural selection. This is the base for ethics, for culture, even for legal and the governance system. This is the long-time natural selection. That's the first point. And second is pandemic. To stop the pandemic, and request more collectivism than individualism. We need, this is a matter of people and the relation of people. So we need much more collectivism than individualism to stop the pandemic. And the third point is individualism, or I would like to say the diversity, which is the key for creativeness, for development, as well as long-term safety of people. And like the mRNA vaccine is a product of individualism development. It's not the long way of traditional vaccine. We need creativeness to have the new products for the development, and also for all lives, not only people, but also all lives in the planet. The diversity is the key for the safety of the species. And the fourth point is, especially for people in China, what we need. We need a lot more individualism. And people in US might need some collectivism as well. That is, and from different people, and we have different characteristic from the natural selection and from the culture, the ethics, the legal system that develop from them. In the 5 points, I would, the fifth point I would like to mention. Now we are facing the public health emergency. We are facing the climate emergency. We are facing the biodiversity emergency, which need more collectivism than individualism. But at the same time, and people all need to change. We all need to change to fit the new time, the new civilization. We call, some people call it eco-civilization. These people in the, all people in the planet need to change to fit the change, the time. Like Mr. Charles Darwin says, survival of the fittest, the fittest. So we need to change to fit the challenge, to fit the new time, to fit the new civilization. So we all need change to fit. And this pandemic is a great lesson, it's a big lesson. It's also a big natural selection. All people in the planet need to change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very well. This is actually a very good continuity again with the 5 elements. Now we are focusing on the collectivism and also individualism. As we mentioned, it's actually somehow not opposite to the other one, but it's combining just like yin and yang. Basically, all the collectivism and also the individualism are mixing together and they are in harmony somehow. And it is depending on which situation and switch to what is necessary. Just let me remind everyone, if you have questions with the attendees, if you have questions directly to any of the panelists, please put in your right-hand side, that's a Q&A box. You can send in the questions, because after that, we will have a Q&A session after all the speakers, all the panelists talk about that. Okay, let's switch a little bit towards a bit smaller country like Malaysia. Is much bigger than Singapore, so I'm a Singaporean, so I have to watch at Malaysia. Big. Okay, so ZAKRI, it's your turn.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very delighted to be here and very honored. I'm trained as a biologist. My 5-minute intervention may be a bit of an outlier of what have been discussed by other colleagues today. You also posed the issue of the pandemic in your introduction, and I want to address that issue and how it relates to humanity. Up to today, ladies and gentlemen, it is abundantly clear that in mitigating the catastrophic impact of COVID-19, governments of the world are genuinely concerned and preoccupied about saving human lives, maintaining human well-being, and halting an economic meltdown of an untold proportion. Well, I think this is well-founded, justified, and rightly so. As someone aptly pointed out, we will never stop COVID-19 until everyone, everywhere, has access to an effective vaccine. In the words of the World Health Organization, no one is safe until everyone is safe. With that in mind, let's very briefly look at some of the economic stimulus packages introduced by governments around the world. The European Union agreed to a historic $1.21 trillion pandemic stimulus package that includes, among others, providing massive economic stimulus, supporting health system and infrastructure, protecting in particular the small businesses, and supporting agriculture and fisheries. Second one, newly elected US President Joe Biden, 1.9 trillion economic stimulus package includes a beef up stimulus payment, enhanced unemployment aid, and aid for states and schools. And in my part of the world, the Malaysian government, small country of course, issued an emergency stimulus package worth $4.8 billion to counter the impact of the COVID-19 outbreak. But ladies and gentlemen, I appeal to you to take another look at those three examples I gave, which reflect all of the countries of the world anyway. There's something wrong here. It's all about humans. There's no mention of the environment, nature. We are ignoring the root cause of COVID-19. So you recall last year, a UNEP report released last year describes how much of human activity in recent years has laid the foundation for pandemics, increased urbanization, rapid expansion of cities, and industrialized agriculture. These are some of the biggest causes for concern. Between them, they have caused unprecedented levels of climate change, loss of biodiversity, and environmental damage. And one of that is the outbreak of the zoonotic diseases from crossing into the human population. Zoonotic diseases are those that jump from animals to humans, rats, bats, monkeys, and apes, as well as animals kept as livestock. They are among the most likely to spread zoonotic germs. Some of the illnesses and diseases that have been spread this way include Ebola, HIV, SARS, MERS, Zika, and the new coronavirus. As someone said, the science is clear that if we keep exploiting wildlife and destroying our ecosystem, then we can expect to see a steady stream of these diseases jumping from animals to humans in the years ahead. Pandemics, ladies and gentlemen, are devastating to our lives and our economies. And as we have seen over the past months, it is the poorest and the most vulnerable who suffer the most. So just to conclude, Chair, I think when we talk about the human space here, spare a thought for the environment, the nature. If the nature is not healthy, I don't think our human society will be healthy too. Thank you.
I just agree with the really very good conclusion from your side. It is true somehow also with other discussions with Club of Rome, we were talking about climate change, we're talking about things happening, and we were thinking there must be something happening in the last in the past 4 or 5 years, but we never thought that was pandemic. So that we were all caught in by surprise. Somehow, maybe for a biologist, it's not that a surprise, but more even is that it won't disappear in the soon time, in a short time, and it will be there all the time. And we have to go on and live with that. Still, the collectivism and also individualism has to deal with now vaccine. So everybody look at the vaccine as the only hope. And I'm sure about the science and also the biology. Science, well, there is no such a way is only way. So there is always some other ways. And that is what we're looking for. Okay, so let's turn a little bit further and see how the Arab world is looking at that. Nadeem, your turn.
Thank you. I'm Nadeem Ammar from Israel. It's a privilege and honor to be part of this discussion. I'm really represent the OR Association for the Culture of Peace. It's an association who I created to commemorate the life of my late brother, Munir Ammar, who unfortunately died in a private plane crash 5 years ago. And he was Major General in the Israeli army, and he was head of the civil administration in the West Bank. Just one word about that. Even he was responsible of the civil life of the people in the West Bank. He believed in peace. We believed in education, and the education is the only way to peace. And in his role and as a job, he really kept to keep the rights of the population, to keep the rights of the individual, the freedom of movement, and what we're doing with Mrs. Shoshana Beckerman and also our colleagues. One part of our activities, Alberto Sacconi, who we met over time, to keep his way, to keep to educate for peace and to keep the educate for rights and the freedom of the individuals, which usually really weak with the government or the authority in general. Our life here is slightly different than the European community. And in that sense, the coronavirus really caught up not ready how to deal with the coronavirus. As we have like this gathering, this way of life for hugging, we just like say hello to each other when we hug each other. And it's really was so unbelievable, so difficult, so no way to accept there's a new rule, there's a new life in the corona period, in the corona. And it took a long time, months and months, for the Arab community here to accept the fact of the coronavirus. Said, no, it's a fake news. There's no such a disease called corona. It's a political issue. It's the leader issue. It's a way to control our life, way to control our freedom, way to control our behavior, because our behavior may be not acceptable for others. So like we have wedding days with a 1,000 or even more people, or like a funeral. If we have a funeral with like at least 500, 1,000, and it's like for us as a social activist, as a political activist, I mean, just yesterday, where I live here in a small town in northern of Israel with Julius, a lady, a woman died, and there's like maybe tens of the council employee have to make sure that the people separate one of each other. And this the consequence of this, unfortunately, there's like the death casualties and the illness within the Arab community. Also, it's the same like with this with the Haredim in Israel. It's more than the average of the Israeli society, because it's so difficult to change the way of life, and it's also difficult to understand that okay, we educate for freedom, or we educate for rights, but it doesn't mean that your freedom to affect or to hurt the collective, the world. And this gap, this between the people and between between the people in the towns and villages and the government in Jerusalem, in Tel Aviv, make this like something who hesitating to accept the new rule. And that's our duty, that's our role here, to say, no, it's not a game, it's not a fake news, it's really a dangerous disease. We have to obey the rule, we have to keep, we understand that it's difficult not to hug each other, not to hug your mom, your children, your kids, your friends, but we have a new world, we have a new role. Hopefully it's going to end sooner. Also, like people not really rush to take the vaccine here, because in their mind there's no such disease, in their mind there's no such corona. Their mind, it's our control of freedom, our control of way of life. And but I'm really something after half a year, and after like for the last 3-4 months, when really the majority here, the people here say, yeah, there's illness, death, not only elderly people, also young people. We see more or less people start to accept the way, start to accept the rule here. And on our part, as the all foundation or the social and political leaders here, that our task and our experience in how to dealing with the community, how to deal with maybe make some success to bridge the gap between the individuals and the authority. And that's my conclusion, that maybe in different culture, in different communities, it's not only if you leave the authority, if you leave the main government to give the role, it won't work. You need the local leaders, the local community to make this link for understanding really that's the right, the freedom of the individuals must combine with the collective, and in this way, hopefully we come through this this disease. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
That's really interesting. So if you still remember what Shuai just mentioned, the 5 elements, the belief is the number 5 with the sequence. That's actually the metal. And the freedom is water. So from belief to freedom, that's from metal to water. So it's actually, water is the one created by metal. Interesting somehow. And on the other hand, if we think about the Chinese medicine, it's all about pandemic. And the whole medical book started 500 after Christos, dealing with pandemic only. So when Chinese listen to the word of pandemic, they just queued up and say, what should we do? And we will do all together. Well, that's a Chinese mentality. That's why it was so easy to call upon one way and everybody just line up and do the same thing. Okay, let's switch a little bit further and to a African-American society. That's now it's your turn.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm honored to be part of this panel presentation and conference during COVID-19. I think the timing of this panel discussion and topic, so keenly aware of our time in history, my approach will be from a public administration theory regarding the social contract as proposed by Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau, as we talk about government intervention in solving the pandemic problem, as well as allowing for and attempting to reconcile freedom and cultural diversity. So a contractual agreement to form a society where we live, as you propose, reconciling social harmony with individual rights and cultural diversity. We know that government and citizen interaction is argued through the social contract. Citizens and government make up society, and we agree to certain standards and moral obligations in exchange for goods and services. I think, as was mentioned, the bailout is an example of what we expect government's reaction to be in the time of this pandemic, that we expect some relief. This paradigm has worked modestly well up until the technology advancement leading to the Internet of Things, and weaknesses in the contract made apparent by the release of COVID-19. The advance of technology through the Internet of Things, citizen demonstrations have shaken the ruling class to its core. Individuals have demonstrated through Black Lives Matter. BLM demonstrations are repeating around the world as outrage citizen rights violations. Now this goes with Amnon was talking about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And so the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights was written in post-World War II era, unintentionally supporting ruling parties and class politics while weakening the marginalized. The articles of the UDHR have been violated over and over again in the US and elsewhere in the world. Weaknesses in the contract and violations of the UDHR need to be addressed and strengthened. And this is a momentous planetary moment. WAAS and its partners have an opportunity to reconcile social harmony by supporting individual rights and cultural diversity. We could do this by shaming those countries that violate the social contract and violate the articles of the UDHR. But this would, of course, support all the things that all the previous panelists have spoken about, even those that impede upon the 5 elements, yes? And as well as those that impede upon a natural relationship with nature. So WAAS, along with local partnerships, in my opinion, must strengthen the UDHR, highlight its weaknesses, and point out violators. When the UDHR was written, no one imagined a power shift or even power sharing. No one thought that Blacks in the United States could wield global power to impact social movements around the world. It is the laissez-faire attitudes of the global community that allowed the US, China, Germany, and atrocities in Africa to impose race policies that violate the human rights of the individual. And this goes along with trying to reconcile individual rights and cultural diversity. To reconcile social harmony, as you posed, Dr. CHENG, earlier, with individual rights and cultural diversity, requires the global community to grow a backbone and do the right thing for its citizens. Without the restructuring and adherence to the social promises made by those in power, we will see more uprisings, disruptions, and increasing class wars. In my opinion, the social contract requires a revision. As the president and founder of the African American Future Society, what I do is look at future trend and analysis of African Americans, global trends as far as how marginalized impact the world, and as well as how that interrelates and moves across the sea to Africa and other places where the diaspora are found. So in my mind, we need to strengthen what's already there, but we also need to look at a new paradigm shift of what the social contract meant in its original creation and what it means moving forward going into the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There are not many questions that we have to answer. So I've seen that Gary has raised his hand and have questions, I suppose, or remarks. Gary?
Well, I just wanted to remark, because I do see we're approaching the end of a wonderful discussion, which should just be beginning now, not ending. I wanted to thank all the panelists. I just wanted to comment, I think the discussion of the freedom and authority, the individual and collective is exactly what it right on. And my only comment would be, in principle, we understand theoretically that there has to be a balance and a harmony. In practice, we have societies around the world which have found different combinations of relative importance to the one or the other. And these are the cultural variations. And the COVID, the pandemic, has dramatically illustrated to the Western world that there are circumstances in which the collective conformity to a social authority has an immense value for survival. There's no question about it. And it's inconsistent with our value that individuality and individual freedom is everything. And the problem is, I think we have two extremes that we're looking at now in the world, neither of which is the whole truth. And the East rightly condemns the excessive individuality that denies the collective relationships and the fact that no individual thrives without the support of the collective. And in my own country, I'm from California, we take the other position as if everybody has created their own world and why should anybody infringe on our right to everything? If I add a comma after something, I own the whole thing, even though it's a 2,000-year-old inherited tradition that gives me a new power because of all society has given. And I think this discussion related to the pandemic only highlights the fundamental challenge for humanity, not to reconcile two extremes, but to reconcile 193 or 193,000 cultural variations. And I think Jinfeng alluded to some of this too, and find that right harmony that's not a compromise, but it's really a synthesis that recognizes both the truths. And maybe there are societies that are closer to that have really harmonized it. But personally, I feel, speaking that these two, we're juxtaposing the extreme individualism and what to the West looks like an extreme collectivism. We're juxtaposing the unreconciled extremes, each of which is unacceptable to the other. And how are we going to find a peace and harmony in the world unless we both discover there's a higher truth? And maybe that's why the world is finally coming together, where we can't live separately ignoring each other. We have to find that higher truth and that higher synthesis of the values. So thank you all for a wonderful discussion.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this session. I think I really enjoy moderating this, and I'm very happy. That's the beginning. That's the only beginning. It will continue.
Let's remember that, Yi-Heng, and follow it up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.